Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our April 24th, 2024 Left Plan 2 board meeting. I'd like to go ahead and call us to order. Let's go ahead and start off with a moment of silence to remember our fallen brothers and sisters across the country. And I believe also, just a special thought, it is Professional Public Administrator Day. So thanks to all of those who help run our organizations. And Steve, I'll even throw you into that mix for just, how do you like that?
Thank you. I was going to mention something about that in the admin update, but yeah, doing your job to the best of your abilities requires a great team. I've got an excellent team here, and special shout out to Jesse and Chloe. My last right hand and my new right hand, both keeping me straight. I've got a all-star team right now trying to keep me in line, and so thank you guys.
Right. Let's go ahead and take a moment of silence. All right, thank you very much. But we do have a quorum and a number of folks are online as well. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. Appreciate that. So looking at our agenda, our item number 1 is the approval of March 27th to 2024 minutes as presented. I would entertain a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to adopt the minutes. Is there discussion? Bear with me. I always got to look at the screen, make sure I'm not missing anybody. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The minutes are adopted. Thank you very much. Steve, I believe item number 2 is the 2023-2025 operating budget presented by Tim Valencia.
Okay, so while Tim's coming up, just a heads up, this has to do with changes that were made in the board's budget by the state budget in the last session. And since you guys adopt the budget, you also need to adopt those changes, and Tim will walk you through what those items were. With that, I will turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Tim Valencia, Deputy Director for the Left 2 Board. And since Steve's already took my opening comments there, I will give you some reminder that the Left 2 expense account, which pays for the agency operations, was created in statute, Fund 548. All of the expenses for the operation of the agency are funded from the trust fund. Although our budget is not appropriated in the budget is allotted, which means it really it's subject to review and I guess I'll call it approval by OFM in our overall spending plan. As Steve mentioned, there was an allotment increase by the legislature in the 2024 supplemental budget. This is kind of normal operating procedure in the short year. In this case, the impact on our budget was larger than it normally is in the supplemental, and as a result, just as best practice that has been recommended by our auditors, that these kinds of changes should be reviewed and approved by the board itself, which is the purpose of today's presentation. And so this will be an action item, and we will ask for action of approval on the new budget. Again, just as a reminder, the budget overview, you have an opportunity to see the updates every quarterly. These are just targeted as expenditures necessary to operate the board. The board meetings are communications and outreach, all the professional development, which is all the conferences and training for both staff and board members, all of our contracts, and then our general agency operations. So to the supplemental budget change, in total, the board's expenditure authority was increased $46,000. That's about 1.2% of the total budget. These are primarily in central services. The Consolidated Technology Service, which is now WATEC, They provide all of our technology support and equipment and services. We contract with them for basically everything technology. That program requested some changes or some increases to their funding. In the end, the impact to our agency is a $35,000 increased spending, but there are some positive items in there for us. Like that will include a new program for doing IT security audits and other things that will be included in the services we pay for them, rather than us having to try and get outside funding for such things. OFM, the same thing. Central services, they provide HR guidance, some budget stuff, all the broad central services. Because of the increases in their costs, the increase to our agency is $10,000. And then there were some tweaks to the healthcare and retirement costs for state employees, which was a total of a $1,000 change. So in total, $46,000 increase in the spending. Again, this is not money that's appropriated to us. It's not given to us. This just means we're now given more room or more called authority to spend another $46,000 out of the trust fund to pay for these additional fees and costs. It's common that at this point in the processes where agency will make changes to their allotments and their overall spending plans. So while we've incorporated this additional $46,000, it was also an opportunity to adjust the spending plan to make sure that the money that we had was being pointed at the appropriate buckets to where we are to actual spending activities. So that's what this slide represents. You'll see that in the first column, the initial 23-25 allotment, this was after the long budget cycle, and then you approved the full budget. The $3,842,000 was what the board had approved, and we've been operating off of that. With the changes, the total allotment goes to $3,888,000. And as you can see, the right column is where did the different categories change? And this just represents where we've inserted the new spending and then just adjusted spending based on our current spending pattern. So, for example, we've increased on the staff and trustee development. At the time we wrote the budget, we were still in COVID. And we weren't sure how much to project on spending. And now this board has done a very good job of seeking out education. So we've made an adjustment to account for what has been an increasing spending pattern there. So anything along those lines, that's where we've made some changes. That is a big change on salary and wages and employee benefits. That is mostly from vacancy savings. From that, we've taken some of that money and then just reallocated that into other spending priorities. So that's where that came from. So that was just available funds that we did not end up utilizing while we had one of the positions vacant for a while and working part-time in one position. So,
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So when we go into the next budget cycle, will we see, because you had a savings for the vacancies, what happens because now we'll be fully staffed again? What happens? Do we have to get that authorized to bring it back up? How do we handle that?
No, we shouldn't in that case, because when we did the 23-25 budget, we had the position budgeted at full salary. And that stays in the maintenance level for the organization. So in that regard, now that would be expected to be included going forward in our operating levels. So typically, say for other structural changes, I would expect that this budget then plus whatever projected increases are going to happen in other services and whatnot, that'll basically start out as our maintenance level budget when we start looking at that numbers and projecting forward. The next operating budget, you'll actually fully adopt it in July of 25, so after the next session, after they pass the budget. But we will work up a budget beforehand just to see if we have any needs that may require a decision package at some point. So we'll have that opportunity to look at that. But the next time you'll actually adopt a full budget will be in July or in the summer of 25, if nothing else, because then we'll submit that in the fall of 25 to OFM. So,
Hi, Tim, this is Mark. Can I ask you a question?
yes.
So I'm looking at the slide here and it says PEB and PERS rate changes. It's a small amount, I guess, overall $1,000, but how do those rate changes affect our budget? What are we paying for?
The PERS contributions for the staff.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and the PEP is the
That's-
healthcare side. It's the contribution to that as well.
Okay, yep,
So much like with, in this system, if we make a contribution rate, change for left, employees end up paying more, the employers end up paying more or less. Same sort of thing. It's just the adjustment on the per side.
okay, great, thank you.
So with that, what the ask is today is for just, I guess I'll call approval of the new allotment and spending priorities, primarily moving from the 3.842 million to the 3.888 million, since that will be spent out of the trust fund. So today your options are to adopt the revised allotment and plan, or to not make that adoption.
So,
Move the
Mr. Chair,
presentation.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt option 1 to adopt the revised allotment and plan.
I
Second.
second.
All right, thank you. We have a motion to adopt the revised allotment plan. Discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Plan is adopted. Thank you, Tim.
Mr. Chair, comment from Jason.
Yes, sir, Jason.
I just wanted to say, thanks, Tim, for that presentation, putting that together. And after reviewing that, I didn't have any additional questions. And I know that it's always certainly the sign of a healthy board to have these discussions and have these questions. But sometimes when your folks do such a great job and things are so clear, there's not a lot of questions to ask. So I just wanted to make that point and say thanks.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments or questions?
I do, with that adopted, I did prepare what would have been the quarterly report after March, reflecting these new spending elements. So I will hand that out to everybody for your review. We are currently running through March, which is the end of the quarter, a 1.7% positive variance, which is pretty much about in line with expectations. I try and keep our budget within 2 to 3%. Of the actual spending number. So that's a $23,000 positive variance. The biennium projection right now with our spending plan, which is what you just saw, we're projected to end at a 1.5% variance. So about $60,000 is, what's in play as far as a positive variance.
Thank you. All right, Steve, looks like,
Okay. Now, the next topic, Jacob will be presenting. So while he's coming up, last meeting, we gave you a high-level preview of all the different things that were kind of on your radar for this upcoming interim. Today is the first step of the adoption of your interim work plan. Some of these items are just scheduled items. They don't require any action for you guys to be on the agenda. There's going to be actuarial presentations, et cetera. There are some, when we get to the benefit topics, that you'll be making decisions on whether or not you want to hear. Jacob will go over this again with you. We don't, you're not required to make a decision on those today. So the adoption of the work plan can take place next month. We don't want to bring issues to you that you haven't had a chance to think about or talk about, and then ask you to immediately vote on them. And so I just want to make that clear before Jacob got started. Even though it's on there as possible executive action, it's May would be the typical date for adopting the work plan. With that, I will turn it over to Jacob.
Hey, good morning. For the record, Jacob White, staff to the board. I will try to power through the echo of my own voice that I'm hearing. That's okay. So like Steve said, went over this last month. We did an initial presentation on the interim preview. And so not going to go over all the items again, but we'll try to highlight changes and then really focus on the possible benefit topics for discussion. For the actuarial topics, this is a contribution rate setting year, and it's going to be the first time the board has done that since the passage of the benefit improvement bill, the benefit enhancement bill. And so there will be some changes to that process. The initial presentation will be next month, and I'll be doing that and working with the actuaries on putting together those materials. And then I believe they've done at least the last audit, but the actuaries will be working with Milliman again on the audit of the actuarial valuation. Head to the administrative topics. So there's no changes here from last month. Really, the only one that might stand out as something different than what the board has done in the past is on this item number 2, salary setting responsibility, which is a new responsibility of the board after the passage of last year's board bill that allows the board to set salaries for policy positions of the board. So on to possible benefit topics. I'm going to go through each of these on additional slides. I'll get into more detail, but just wanted to at least show you the big slide of all of the topics listed out so you could see how many are on there. And then I did want to add that there is a 12th item that has been added to this list. And that item comes from the correspondence that the board received. This one from WACOPS regarding duty disability insurance coverage. Is also referred to as a disability leave supplement. And so we can talk about that later in the presentation. And then I did want to add before I get into each of those topics that the board does have the option to take action today on any items they would like to move forward or decide not to move forward. But typically the board has waited until would not do that at this meeting, would do it at the next meeting, would wait to adopt the whole interim plan together instead of item by item. Okay, so the first policy item is holiday payments. And so the issue here, for each of these items, I'm going to have the issue statement and then a brief description of the status of that item. So for holiday payments, this comes from the board from last interim. The board ended up not putting this into deciding to do legislation last year and instead asked for it to be considered this interim, moved to this interim. So the issue was that the current administrative interpretation of when holiday pay is considered earnable compensation is found in an employer notice with DRS rather than in rule. And so the board asked DRS if they would be willing to put that into rule. And last interim, and DRS said yes, they would. And so we've been working with them on that. It's in the rulemaking process right now. They filed what's called the 101. The first step was done a while ago, and we've seen a draft of the rule, and I believe it's close to the 102 step in the process, which comes right before the public hearing. The status of this would be that we would continue to keep board staff would continue to keep the board apprised of the status of that, and if for any reason the rule ended up not moving forward, we would let the board know, and the board could then make a decision about next steps. Item 2, authorize leave of absence service credit purchase at retirement. So this was another one that came from last interim. The board looked into a broader, a different issue, and ended up drilling down to this being what the underlying issue actually was. And so here, the issue is that members retiring immediately after being out on temporary non-duty disability are not eligible to purchase service credit, while those who retire immediately after being out on duty disability can. And so this impacts not just those that are on temporary non-duty disability, it's anyone taking an authorized leave of absence. You can't purchase service credit if you retire without returning to work. I believe Representative Berquist had a question last month on this that I did just want to bring up. Try to answer a little more thoroughly than I think I did last month, which was that so there is the ability when you retire, you can purchase service credit or purchase an additional annuity. And the difference between authorized leave of absence and those types of purchase service credit is that under an authorized leave of absence service credit purchase, it counts as real service credit, meaning that it can qualify you for the benefit enhancement. The service credit goes to determining your benefit, being eligible for early retirement. Where if you purchase service credit or purchase an additional annuity, that's just a separate annuity. It doesn't actually go to your service credit for those other benefits in LEF. And so if the board moved forward with this item, it would be for possible legislation, which would mean it would go through the normal three-step process of an initial, comprehensive, and then potentially final presentation. Okay, next issue is a new one. This one came from correspondence that the board received from a member who was working full-time as a LEF EMT and then was picking up additional shifts for a different employer, and those shifts were not under LEF. And so the issue was members who are working full-time for one employer and part-time for another employer may not be eligible for benefits from their second employer, LEF benefits, including line of duty death and disability benefits. And so we've started looking into this issue more and realized that it goes beyond concurrent employment into also including part-time employment. And so the status of this one would be start with likely an educational briefing presentation. And I've started reaching out to DRS and others to get a better grasp on this specific situation and any other issues that could come out of it. Starting to look for data sources to brief the board with. And so after the educational briefing, the board could decide to study this further and go through the three-step policy briefing process. Month of death. This issue the board's very familiar with. It's been studied a few times by the board, and it was a bill that the board did not endorse, but the board supported last session that did not pass. And so the issue is that in the month the retiree or survivor passes away, the last month benefit payment is prorated based on the number of days the person was alive in the month, and that this can result in an overpayment and an invoice being sent to the family or estate to collect on any amount that they received that had not been prorated. And so I did attend the select committee meeting last month, and they did discuss, they were doing their legislative debrief on what passed and what didn't, and they had some discussion of this bill. They haven't yet decided on what their interim plan is. It didn't sound like they were likely to continue to study this and issue again this year, but like I said, they haven't made that decision for sure yet. And so last year, the board decided to follow the lead of the select committee and DRS. And so the board could make that decision again this year or choose to go through the policy process again and potentially support legislation again this year. DRS appeals deadlines. This came from last interim. This was another issue the board studied and decided to not move forward with legislation last year. As a reminder, the issue was that some Left 2 members have missed their deadline to file an administrative appeal with DRS and expressed concerns regarding a lack of clarity on the deadline, particularly when the member is required to provide additional information. And so we had the issue of there's one deadline for the first administrative appeal step of a petition, and then DRS has a different deadline for appeals. And then sometimes DRS will ask the member to provide some additional records, but when they do that, they don't toll the deadline. So the member could be under the impression that that deadline is being tolled when it's not being tolled. And there were some communication issues that occurred. So so the option on that one would be to the board could study it again this interim and would go through the policy process if you choose to do so of potentially 3 presentations. I guess I should add that I have deferred to next interim because there had been some discussion of potentially that DRS was looking at. We were working with DRS on improving communications and communicating to members what deadlines are, and had asked them to consider, the board had asked them to consider rulemaking, but they were unwilling to do that last year. They didn't feel that rulemaking was necessary to change those deadlines or to add tolling. And then COLA and inflation. So over the last few years, or at least the last 2 years, the board has received a lot of comments and questions and concerns from members, retirees regarding inflation and the 3% cap on a COLA. Even with the Left 2 having COLA banking, there's been concern about how long, with how big is that bank getting and how many years will it take for members to actually receive, retirees to receive what's in the bank. And so issue here, recent inflation has greatly exceeded expectations, which has created concerns for some retirees about how long it will take for the current COLA to catch up with their lost earning power. The status of this would be an educational briefing, including the size of the bank. We'd work with the actuary's office on identifying the size of the bank, and then possibly some stochastic modeling on when the bank will be exhausted. And the board could, through that process, identify an option to receive a pricing from OSA. There's been quite a lot of questions about what options could the board have, such as one-time larger COLA to deplete some of that bank, or to change the ceiling on the COLA moving forward. So the board could identify an option and then work with the actuary's office to get a pricing on that. Part-time law enforcement issue here is that legislation that passed last session makes part-time law enforcement officers eligible for Left Plan 2. There were a lot of questions about possible impact from this legislation. And so staff will keep the board informed of DRS's implementation of the bill, and including any policy issues that may arise from that. It's part of a topic that Steve and I talked to DRS about during our monthly Left 2 DRS staff meetings for updates on the project status for implementing that bill, and any issues they may see or that we hear about from other sources. And so if any of those issues do come up, Steve would discuss those during his admin updates with the board, and then the board could decide whether you believe it's necessary to do the policy briefings on any of those issues. So this one is new. It was not included in last month's presentation. It comes from correspondence from the State Patrol. And so the State Patrol first reached out to Department of Retirement Systems regarding possible left membership for their fire training academy training staff positions to be eligible for left 2. Currently, they would not be because they're not a left 2 employer. And then there would be some question about even if they were a left 2 employer, would these positions qualify? We haven't had a chance to dive into that and review the position descriptions and to see, but there is a belief that they likely would be if the State Patrol was an eligible employer. And so the status of this one is that the Left 2 board does not recommend legislation on membership. That's not included in the boards. Steve, help me out with that part of this one.
Yeah, so when the board was created, the statute limited issues that the board could and could not consider. One of those was new groups of employees being eligible for membership in LEF. So if you're talking about clarifying eligibility for existing people, like the definition of firefighter bill last session, that's okay. But if a new group wants to be in, that's outside the board's authority. This one, just as a quick point of clarification, there was no correspondence to the board on this. So this was simply an email that came out from the patrol to me and saying, hey, we're interested in this issue. Would you be willing to sit down and talk with us? Jacob and I are going to meet with the patrol to figure out what this is. We didn't want to be talking with them without informing you, which is what we're doing today, that this is out there and that they wanted to talk to us. We're not sure yet what they want and whether what they want would even be within the board's authority, but we should have the answers to all of those questions for May.
Thank you. And number 9, we have implementation of the board's legislation from last session. So legislation, let's see. Yeah, the legislation had 4 benefit improvements and granted the board additional authority over salary setting for some board positions. So there'd be a educational briefing on the new board salary setting authority, and then board staff will keep the board informed on DRS's implementation of the other parts of the bill, including any policy issues that may arise. Benchmarking, this was a carryover from last year. The board previously received presentations comparing Left 2 benefits to other plans. And so I believe it was after the benefit enhancement bill passed, there was some question about now where does Left 2 set compared to other plans. And so last year there ended up not being enough time to do that study just because of how intensive that would be to or had been in the past to do a survey of plans from around the country and gather that data and information for the board. So the question for the board this year would be, is there still an interest in that? And then just for the board to be aware that it is a significant workload required to update that information. And then we have the Ombuds program review. So board members, yeah, I'm not. Next slide. So board members have expressed an interest in learning more about the Ombudsman program. It's something I know you hear a lot about from your members. We hear a lot of positives about how helpful the program is. And so the idea here would be an educational briefing for not just information about what the program does, but also data regarding the reach and impact of the program. And so this would just be a one educational briefing for the board. And then I don't have a slide on it, but the board did receive correspondence from the Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs, WACOPS, with the request to consider the topic of disability leave supplement. So that would be another item, and the board could potentially do 3 policy presentations on that. And so next steps are no action required today, but in the interim plan is on the schedule for next month, and the board could adopt the plan at that time. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve. So for our planning, I know Jacob covered a lot of stuff. For our ability to help you guys prepare for the May meeting, if you have questions now on any of these 12 topics, something that you either want more information about or want to talk a little bit about now to make sure you're clear about what Jacob said, it would be super helpful for us to have that discussion now so that we can be better prepared for May. So if there is anything in all of that that you want to talk about a little bit further, please speak up. Thank you.
Questions or comments?
I'd like to actually have 2 motions, Mr. Chair. This is Jason.
Okay, go ahead.
My first motion would, given the task ahead of us with these, the items we have, I think we could consider now removing items 8 and 10 off of our staff's plate. I'm not sure that there's any urgency or exigency to those items. Those are kind of nice to haves. I don't see them as need to haves given the workload we have. So that would be my first motion, Mr. Chair. And for the information for the board, number 8 is the WSP Fire Training Academy. Steve and Jacob are going to meet on that, and that's just an informative thing, but I don't think there's anything else needs to be done on that. And number 10 is the benchmarking peer comparison. Unless another board member has something that would indicate otherwise, I'm not sure that that's something that we really have the time and resources given our workload. So, Mr. Chair, that'd be my first motion, just to clear 8 and 10 off the workload.
Okay. Would entertain a second for discussion.
I'll second.
And motion's made and seconded. Open up for discussion on the motion to remove number 8 and 10 from our benefit topic list. I guess for procedure, and I think just for Steve, what do we owe the State Patrol? I mean, I understand that they have reached out to you. I just don't want to, and I appreciate the motion. I just want to make sure that we have another agency that's reached out to us. I don't want to ignore them somehow or not do our due diligence in being responsive. So do we have
So at this point in time, I can't tell you whether 8 is an issue for the board or not. I was planning on being able to tell you that in May. Until we talk to the patrol and have a better understanding of exactly what the issue is and what they're expecting. For instance, they might want to change the definition of employer in the left statutes. If they do, that could very well be a board issue. But at this point in time, I just don't know what they want and whether it's a board issue or not. So that's as much as I can say about 8, having just the limited level of discussion that I've had with them.
okay? I don't know. Go ahead. I feel like a big hammerhead shark looking at 2 sides of my head. I was like, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It sounds like, after the meeting, you might find out that it may rise to the occasion. We could bring it back up next month if we needed to.
Okay, that works. That work for you?
Yep.
Jay, I think you're gonna say something. Go ahead. Okay. All right. So any other discussion? Sorry. So on the motion to remove 8 and 10 from the possible benefit topics, with the caveat, if we have something that comes back that requires our board action, we can reinstate and put it back on our list. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carried to remove number 8 and 10 from the list. Are there other questions or comments? Looking at this group. Jason, I'm sorry, second motion.
Yeah, second motion was to essentially on the rest of the topics are largely information gathering. There's a little bit more info that we need in multiple different areas that I do know that the staff is working on. That I make a motion to readdress these topics next month when we have more information to make a decision on what we end up moving forward with. So basically one information briefing on the remaining topics.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Jay.
I guess I'm just asking, I don't know that I understand the motion. So one of our options is to defer action on this until next month, right? So by default, is that what we're doing with this motion? Or do we need the
Yes.
motion?
Yep, that is my motion.
I'm just wondering, do we need the motion to do that?
Is it on our May work agenda plan right now?
It is. So the effect of the motion would be to kind of finish the discussion for today, for lack of a better.
Correct.
Other discussion? Yeah. If I can, and Jason, I'm going to paraphrase, is really to move this to our May meeting for adoption.
That is correct.
Yeah. All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, so with the exceptions of number 8 and 10 being removed, again, with the caveat we could bring it back if we had to, we added item number 12, which was the request by WACOPS to do research regarding a disability. We'll have the other items brought forward. And I guess, Stephen, I think you mentioned it, or Jacob, the possibility of maybe grouping these with educational areas that are
Yeah,
just
we'll-
follow up.
We'll have them organized for the next meeting to break them out between those that are an educational briefing only, topics that are at least an educational briefing, and then we'll be looking to you to whether you want to move forward with them or not, depending on the first briefing, and those that are going to require the full 3 briefings right from the beginning, potential legislation.
And then I guess my goal, my objective would be to work with the administrative team to kind of go over these lists and make sure we understand what's actually out there, and then work with all of you. So when we come into May, we have a really good idea of what's taking place and what's expected.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or comments regarding the benefit topics? All right, seeing none. Thank you for that, Jason, for the motions. I guess we're on the administrative update. Yeah. Is that where we see ourselves? I think so.
All right. So for the administrative update, Tim handed out the quarterly budget update to you guys earlier. It'll be sent out to all the board members. We usually we'll do those quarterly budget updates in the admin update, and we'll send them out to you a week ahead of time so that you have time to kind of review and bring back questions. Since that wasn't the case today, you were taking action on it today. any questions that you have regarding that, you can ask of me in the meantime, or it'll be on the agenda for the admin update next meeting, and you can ask questions and have a board discussion at that time. There was some outreach activities by the board during the past month. Tammy presented at the Seattle Firefighters Wellness Seminar, and both Tammy and Jessica were there with a table to answer questions about the Ombudsman program. The State Council of Firefighters had their educational seminar in Vancouver. We had a table there all 3 days to answer questions from members about benefits of the plan. There were no presentations given. Then we've got quite a bit of outreach upcoming in the next month or two that I want to give you a heads up on. So WACOPS is having their spring meeting. We will have a table there. It will be the Ombudsman again. No presentation is expected. The Washington Association of Police Chiefs is going to have their spring expo, and we'll have a table there as well. The 9th and 10th District of the State Council of Firefighters is putting together a mini educational seminar in May, and we will have a table at that to answer questions. And then we're also planning on having a table at the State Council of Firefighters annual convention in June. So that's right now. As far as education goes, a reminder to all the trustees, the NC PERS is having their annual conference in May in Seattle. And so it's not too late, but it's right up at the last minute. But if you want to attend any of those educational activities, I know I had trustees asking me about that last week. So I just want to make sure all of you knew that that was out there and it's available. The next meeting of the board is scheduled for May 29th.
Great.
That concludes my administrative update, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments for Steve regarding his update? I did share with Steve yesterday. I had the opportunity on Monday. I went up to Juneau to their state capital and gathered with firefighters and a few police officers to find a way to restore their public pension back to a defined benefit. And they, for 19 years, they have been fighting this. And as they would say quite publicly, it's a failed experiment. It has, the defined contribution has put them upside down as far as retention, and they find themselves chasing their tail on this thing because the issue or the concern is it a defined benefit or a defined contribution problem, or is it a retention problem? And I think what we've learned, I think we're very fortunate in our state, we've learned that it is a defined benefit problem that creates a retention problem or lack thereof. And it was great to hear some of the legislators speak out for them. But I told Steve yesterday, I had one of the coalition leaders was very, I think, honored and pleased to have had Steve, work on this bill before and has spoke on it and addressed some of the individuals and provided his expertise. And he wanted to make sure that I complimented, Steve on his work. And, they view our program, our pension system here, specifically our left system, as being one of the best in the country. I think we take great honor and great pride of knowing what we do here is good for our members, active and retirees. So I wanted to say thanks to Steve and your staff, for the work you do. I thought it was just kind of nice to be somewhere else and having this guy pull me aside and recognize you. So I thought that was pretty good. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah, you guys have done extraordinary work as a board. This plan has been extraordinarily successful. I don't know sometimes how much you realize in the national perspective how well, just what an extraordinary job you guys are doing. And so for years, for instance, there's There's been a debate out there about whether defined contribution plans or defined benefit plans are better for employers, for workers. And anytime there has been a desire to have somebody speak about a successful defined benefit plan, I am frequently asked to do that presentation. And that's because of all the work that you guys have done and the success that you've had. Really, Left 2 is, as far as a model defined benefit plan, it'd be hard to find one better around the country. And so I've had the opportunity to speak from New York to Alaska to national conferences to local conferences, all about what it is about Left 2 and what it is about the work that the board has done that makes it so successful, so that other Alaska, if they're considering a defined benefit plan, if they want to do a good one, they could learn a lot from your success. Is essentially the message there. But I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, it was nice to have, we had a number of firefighters from our state organization and to be up there with them. And I think they were really surprised. We had, I want to say there's probably close to 50 across the gathered, and we would line the hallways. The state capitol in Juneau is much different than here in our capital. They don't have the rotunda. It's not set out. It's really more of an office type building that they have, I guess, remodeled and made it work for them over a number of years. And we would line the hallways, and we felt kind of bad because they had to walk down the hallway. And it was kind of like, it's almost like getting a spanking machine out. If you didn't support it, you're going to get a little whoop on it. But it was, I was very proud to be part of that group that went up there. And again, thanks to Steve for his work. Under public comments, the only public comment I'm aware of was the one received from the executive director of the Walk-Ups, Teresa Taylor, which has been again added to our number 12 on our list. So I think we are good to go for that. Was there anything else public comment wise?
No.
Any other comments from either those virtual or here? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn till our May meeting. Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn till our May meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us.